Chapter 15-20. I said my goodbyes to Thorum and departed at dawn. The old cart driver was waiting for me, having paid him for a few days to stay here. I had a second job to take care of. The enchantments on the companion's weapons only took the better part of a day, and I even had some supplies left. The pay was decent as well, a good chunk to add to my savings. Perhaps I should have handled the whole thing better. Well, I guess everything turned out well enough. It seemed like no one harbored any grudges against me. I probably bought a bunch of goodwill by giving that formula to the Harbinger. Well, let the pieces fall where they may. Still, though, that old man had some frighteningly perceptive eyes. Felt like he could see right through me in some capacity. The enchanting was a good experience as well. It gave me some inspiration for a few spells, using the runes of this land, that is. They create a spell circle around a single rune, modifying it to a certain extent to perform actions. It's like a runic sentence in practice. Now what if I could combine the two applications? Wait, I should deal with the first steps before jumping ahead. A thought popped into my head as I formed the magic in front of my hand. Instead of the native rune, I used the ones passed down by Odin. A single rune, a Soilo, actualized and modified with the native variants to change its intent. The spell was brought forth, floating in the air in front of me. With a thought, a huge bolt of lightning was discharged, tearing apart a chunk of earth behind the carriage. What in oblivion? The old man shouted in surprise. Sorry, was testing something. I hurriedly shouted. A little warning next time. He mumbled in annoyance. I handed him a couple bottles of mead. He seemed content with that. It was a good spell, but the most interesting thing, the runic circle still persisted, and I knew I could use several more times before the mystery faded. The stored power was impressive. Maybe I could even overload it in a single burst or lower the output and keep it continuously firing over a long period. This had a lot of potential. It was only my first attempt. I knew I could modify them better for varied use. Now, what do I call them? Tradition dictates I give them a sufficiently edgy name without coming off too ridiculous. I'll think of one later. I've never been very good with names. What do you think, Drake? Asking for my advice? I just shrugged. I didn't have any else to talk to about this stuff. You've been around a while and probably knowing a thing or two. True. It looks decent, has potential, but I wouldn't ever call it a trump card as it is now. I think you should focus on seeing how many of those runic circles you can create in a single moment. That aligns with my own thoughts. It would be good for clearing away a lot of bugs, maybe even a good pressuring spell. But against someone powerful, like say the Archmage, it wouldn't do any lasting damage. Who knows about in the future, it has potential. Never liked those Norse guys, but they had some pretty decent magic. That was high praise from him. Well, it shouldn't be difficult to actualize several simultaneously. I could modify the existing spell to basically come into existence with the corresponding runic circle already attached. The only issue would be the singular rune that starts the process, which I'm already proficient in drawing. Hell, drawing is more of a misnomer these days. Really, it's more of a gesture that bring it forth. Hey, is that it? I stood up, looking a bit over the next cliff. That's the statue of Meridia. And here is where you get off. He said bluntly. I just blinked at him. You can't go any closer. What have I told you about Daedra, boy? Did you listen to none of my words? And here you are doing something in one of their shrines. He threw his hands up. Well, if I don't do it, someone else will. I shrugged. Do what you need to. He snorted. Just make sure not to make any damn deals. I guess he's kind in his own way. Alright, old man, wait for me at Solitude. I may be a day or so. Don't need to be telling me twice. Them Solitude ladies needin' some company. He whistled. I couldn't help but laugh. He was really a character. I walked up to the statue. It was a bit bigger in person, though not as intimidating as I thought. Mortal, a voice boomed out. Listen. Hear me and obey. A foul darkness has seeped into my temple. A darkness that you will destroy. But first, you must restore to me my beacon. I shall guide you unto it. Find it and return here. And great shall be your rewards. I stood there for a moment, letting the words wash over me. It sounds kind of scripted, like a magically recorded message. There was also no presence behind the words. Strange. Curiously, I stepped off the temple and back onto the mountain. And after a few more moments, I stepped back on. Mortal. Listen. Hear me and obey. A foul. I stepped away again, then stepped back up. Is this magic that triggers whenever someone steps past a certain point? That's hilarious. Mortal. Listen. Hear me and OB. I think I heard Draig laughing in my soul as I kept doing it. Mort. More. Mortal. Would you stop it? That familiar voice finally changed, something around me stirred as well, like a pair of eyes were now staring at me. Why are you not approaching? The female voice once again echoed out. You told me to stop. Approach, mortal. Okay. I said happily, walking towards the statue. Mortal. Listen. Hear me, Anne. It wasn't me who cut it off that time, and I tried my best to hold back a laugh. Though the voice was being ominously quiet. If it makes you feel better, I think you have a lovely voice. There was an awkward silence. I couldn't really blame her for the whole thing. I mean, why watch over the statue day in and day out? Why not just make a spell that automatically tells anyone approaching of what she needs? It was the efficient thing to do. How many people came here, just to bugger off? It would be annoying to have to personally greet every random person that showed up. I think you need to work on your flirting. Fuck you, my game is on point. On a serious note, are you not afraid of pissing off this godlike being? From what I read, they can't really interact with the world in any meaningful way. I can probably get out of any situation their power wills me into. As long as I don't sell my soul or something stupid like that. A devil selling their soul. I think I heard a sigh coming from the voice. An evil has invaded my temple. You must find my beacon so that my light may re-enter Skyrim and I will make you my instrument of judgment. I can. Is this your beacon? I questioned, taking out the crystal-like thingy holding it up. I'm really enjoying my life right now. Place the beacon on the pedestal. Her voice echoed out again. I just shrugged and set it down. The area began to fill with light as a beam shot up into air. Pretty, I guess. The temple below shook, and I think I heard the sound of doors opening. Mortal, your work is yet done. An evil necromancer has taken hold of my artifact and profanes it with his tainted magics. He wishes to unleash an army of undead upon Skyrim. Become my sword of judgment, cast his soul into oblivion and rid my sanctum of his filth. Well, I was promised rewards and the job did specify this necromancer. I'll do it. I wasn't unprepared for this, regardless of how nonchalant I was acting. I had several healing potions, a couple magicka and stamina potions along with some miscellaneous stuff. I flicked my hand, drawing forth my cane and removed the sword from its sheath. Stepping down the stairs, I entered into the depths below. It was a bit deep, the stairs winding down until they opened up to a room with a beam of light shooting down. It was connecting to a crystal that looked really similar to the beacon I had left up top. If I had to guess, it looked like I was supposed to redirect this light using the mirrors in this place, for some reason. I walked towards the doors, they wouldn't budge, and I didn't see any keyholes. A magical trap type lock then. Would the doors unlock when the light was correctly directed? But then, how did the necromancer get in, or did he arm the locks in the first place? Fuck it. I reinforced my body, cast an oak flesh on myself and kicked the door open. To no one's surprise as it practically swung off its hinges, merely being wood in make and nothing else. Well, I seemed to attract the attention of the necromancer, because several undead walked out from the surroundings. They looked weak. Were they zombies? Their eyes glowed slightly, and they carried themselves better than most low-level undead I was familiar with. Well, I always welcome targets. I waved my hand, invoking several runes in the air and actualizing my runic circles. Lightning, I called out, and they all discharged towards my intended targets. All the zombies except one fell to the ground, motionless as their bodies were charred and burnt thoroughly. The one left had a shield, blocking the attack somewhat. Annoying, I stabbed my sword into the stone and I picked up an axe off the ground, and as the thing approached me, I just caught the handle of its weapon and pulled it out of its grip, tossing it to the side. It tried to bash me with its shield, but I just pushed that away and slammed the axe into its skull, watching it kneel over and stop moving. The door around me triggered some kind of mechanism, iron bars dropped in the doorways, blocking all exists as a bunch of specters appeared in the room. I don't know what type of ghosts they were, but they were pitch black and looked rather spooky. My circles discharged again, letting out a volley of lightning, taking several down. The spell had good power compared to continued use, but these would require a bit more oomph to disperse. Fireball, a simple aria, was invoked as several balls of fire swirled around my hand and grew in size until they launched at a few more of these ghosts. I suppose this would be difficult if someone came in here only swinging normal steel. But a lot of this shit could be downed with magic without much effort. Then again, I guess the necromancer expected more Nords than anything. I saw another of those beacons. I was supposed to do something again. Whatever, I walked over to the iron bars and lifted them up. Even with reinforcement, it was a bit heavy, though they were probably pure iron, so that wasn't surprising. Well, nothing else really jumped out at me. There was another room, but I just kicked open that wooden door too, then made my way further inside. I see, my uninvited guest finally arrived. I heard a voice call out as I entered the inner sanctum. I looked around. It was a wide room, several dozen coffins everywhere, and the supposed necromancer standing overhead at the top of the stairs. Yes, yes. Banter is had. I introduce myself as Wilhelm Henry Schweinorg. You give your name that I care so much about, then you say something stupid, and I retort with something witty. Can we get on with this? Honestly, this was feeling like a chore more so than anything else. How could fighting undead be this boring? He looked at me, annoyance flashed across his face as he raised his hand and arcs of magical energy exploded out towards each coffin. Their lids opened and more zombies began to pour out. Lightning cloak. I recited. My body was enveloped in shroud of lightning, and even my weapon took on lightning-based properties. A nifty little spell I read about the other day. The first few of the zombies walked towards me, weapons raised high. I just rolled my eyes. Earth wall. As the spell suggests, a wall of earth rose up from the ground, blocking a handful of them while I dealt with the rest. I kept a ward, ready to cast in one hand as I kept the necromancer in the corner of my eye. He wasn't doing anything, just watching me intently. I had no idea of his magical prowess. It was good to keep on guard. If I acted more flippantly, would that lure him into making a move? My sword swung through their desecrated remains with relative ease, both reinforced and crackling with lightning. These types of undead were nothing more than fodder. I don't see how these would be able to take over Skyrim. I grabbed another by the head. Ice spear. A large spear left my hand, carrying the zombie and impaling it to the nearby wall. Annoying, I said, as I stabbed the last through the heart, discharging the remains of my lighting cloak inside it, letting the thing burn to a crisp. There were a few more on the other side of the wall. I began to draw a few runes in the air as the wall whittled away into regular earth devoid of my magical energy. Fires of Muspelheim. I invoked. The fires from the realm of giants spread out, enveloping the remaining zombies and burning them to ash. Without the creation cycle bolstering it like with the ice wraiths, it was a much more manageable size for this room I was in. That's not to say that the flame were any less intense. They raged and burned anything in their paths. Even the stones on the floor were scorched black. The only sounds left were coming from the necromancer, clapping his hands. Well done, you are better than that mage that came here before. I guess I'll show you my greatest creation. He snapped his fingers and one last coffin at the top of the stairs opened. It walked out with haggard steps before adjusting itself. It was fully armored, and its eyes glowed with a perception that I didn't recognize in the previous undead. A single axe in one hand, I think it was made from ebony. It looked at me and I felt something shiver down my back. Fuss ro da. Maybe it was instinct or just blind luck that I summoned the boosted gear and used it as a shield while applying all my short-term buffs. I was blown away, barely catching myself before slamming into the back wall. Practically all of my defenses failed and even my boosted gear was pushed back. What the fuck? That was interesting. The fuck did it just do? That wasn't like normal magic. The world bent when it shouted, almost like a marble phantasm, but that isn't right either. My oak flesh was torn apart at impact too. If I get hit by that, I won't come out unscathed. Better finish it quickly. Okay, serious time. Draig, let's do this. Finally, I thought I would never see any action. Boost, the echoing roar of the gauntlet shot out. My body was filled with overwhelming power as everything about me was doubled. What a rush. A few spells flew towards me. I saw the necromancer in the corner began joining the fight. I moved, and it felt like the world around me turned slower. Reinforcement along with my physical abilities doubled. I had long surpassed the physical limits of normal humans. My gauntlet-clad fist found the cheek of the zombie, picking it off its feet and knocking it back into the wall. It dropped its weapon, the ebony axe, as my eyes darted towards my next target. I think the necromancer got scared because he started throwing around wide-range spells, ignoring everything else. Firestorm, he screamed, as the entire area was enveloped in a red hue. At the focal point near the ceiling, a cascade of fire began to rain from above. He dove behind a nearby pillar, casting a shield spell along with anything else he probably would have time for. Annoying, but not anything I can't deal with. I had a couple more runic spells I had created, waiting to be used. The first of the flames fell towards me, I sidestepped them but the air above me continued to ignite with flaming projectiles. I waved my hands, forcing the runes into existence around me, gathering, and stringing them in the correct sequence. Freezing winds of Jotunheim, I clapped my hands together. The runes spun around me like a tornado, cold air bellowed out freezing everything in all directions. My spell overwhelmed his fire even as they collided. Magically, my spells should have been on the losing side when they fought due to his natural advantage from the elemental properties. But mine was invoked with much stronger power both from origin and amount of magical energy pushed in. His pitiful fires were extinguished in a cascade of wintry air. The entire area was filled with a cold frost that permeated every inch of stone. I calmly walked towards the pillar the necromancer was hiding behind. I saw him jump out, hands ablaze and throw a few fireballs at me. It looked like he was predisposed towards fire-based spells. Not that they were anything impressive, his true specialty was most likely necromancy. I could tell by the look on his face that he wasn't used to fighting, head-on, in magical conflict. With a flick of my own hand, I conjured a lesser ward and swat away the weak spells. Kicking off the ground, I moved faster than he could react, and my sword impaled him through the heart. The life died in his eyes, and I made sure to flick an Ansa's rune onto his corpse, no telling what he had hiding inside his body. Necromancers tended to be strange people, no point in taking any risks and just burn the whole thing. I was about to look over his burnt ashes, but my instincts flared and I quickly ducked down. I felt a sharp edge was past my head, slamming into the stone wall. "You're still alive," I mumbled, pulling my sword back, ready to stab him. "Zune Hail Vike," the thing shouted again and my sword went flying. The grip I had on it pointless as whatever occurred, the world forced the weapon to dislodge from my hand. It quickly followed up with another swing of its weapon as I used the gauntlet to block. Whatever intelligence it had, I don't think he could realize that my gauntlet would win against its ebony. No doubt if it were regular steel, I may have lost an arm here. Using my greater strength, I knocked its weapon away, giving me an opening. I cast telekinesis in one hand and turn undead in the other. Both basic spells in their respective schools and pushed them together at the center of the zombie. Turn undead didn't make undead flee as one would think. Granted, that was the most likely outcome. No, it forced an undead away from you. It was just the path of least resistance for the undead to walk away on its own feet to satisfy the underlining concepts of the spell. But combining with the telekinesis, I pulled the undead in, forcing it to fight against the turn undead spell. Like using a single finger to knock something away as opposed to flicking it with two fingers. The conflict only lasted a moment between my two spells, turn undead winning out with ease. The undead's stomach caved in, I felt its weathered bones cracking as the thing's body broke down and exploded backwards. Stones broke and shattered at the impact. I saw pieces of its body get flown across the room, but even still, it still had a little bit of light in its eyes. I just shook my head. Rest in peace. I ignited the remains of its body, letting it turn to ash. Looking around the room, I felt like I could have handled that better. I never felt out of control, except that one moment where I forgot about the zombie and assumed it died. It's just, I can't help but keep comparing myself to the old me. The one who had lived for an uncountable number of years and went through many life or death situations. Yeah, even with the weird magic the zombie was using, I just didn't like how I handled it. I could only click my tongue with a mental promise to get some decent training in. Well, let's see what treasure is left behind. I of course took the ebony axe. From what I understand, it should be worth a good chunk of coin. There was a side room I opened up. Inside was a bed, table and some containers, most notably a chest. Opening it up I just stared, dumbfounded at it being filled with gold. Why was it filled with gold, besides the obvious I mean? I picked up a nearby journal, skimming over a few pages. He was apparently going to be raising an army to conquer Skyrim or some other nonsense. What did he need so much gold for? I highly doubt he would be paying his undead for their services, probably. I had met weirder people in my memories. There were a few places marked on an ugly drawn map of the surrounding area. Were these graveyards? Okay, so he did have a plan and didn't expect to take over Skyrim with a handful of shitty undead. I reached for another book on the table and I felt my body almost fall to the ground. I caught myself and took a few deep breaths. Careful there, the first time is the hardest. Shit, did not expect that. My boost had worn out and my body returned to normal. I ached a tiny bit, moving in ways I shouldn't have been able to. It felt like I had just gone through a good workout. It should get easier the more you use it, and it will build up your strength in turn so you can push your limits further. Interesting, another thing I need to spend time training with. Obvious in hindsight, but it was good to experience it firsthand. I grabbed everything not bolted to the floor and threw it into my ring. If it could be sold, it was coming with me. All that was left, inside a sort of shrine, was the handle of a sword. There were engravings and remains of spells being cast all around it. I assume this is the artifact in question. I drew the sword without any fanfare and inspected the oddly shaped weapon. It looked remarkably sharp, but I could barely feel any power coming from it. Well, I guess I better head back. I made sure to burn all the other corpses along the way, don't want any more necromancers to get any ideas. Killed the necromancer, got the sword. I waved the thing around in front of the giant statue. But, my light hasn't cleansed my temple. The voice said in confusion. Oh, you mean those other beacon things? I just ignored those. Was I supposed to use those? Whoops. My light needs to cleanse the sword. I just shrugged and put the light inside the giant beam that was shooting up into the sky. The sword began to glow bright, a holy light enveloped it, and I felt something take hold of me and sweep me way up in the sky. Before I realized it, I was probably several miles up in the air, overlooking Skyrim, and there was a ball of light floating in front of me. Malkaran is vanquished. Skyrim's dead shall remain at rest as it should be. This is because of you. A new day is dawning, and you shall be its herald. Take the mighty Dawnbreaker and with it purge corruption from the dark corners of the world. Wield it in my name, that my influence may grow. You want me to be your champion? I hazard a guess, and I guess the sword was called Dawnbreaker. Yes. She answered simple, the ball of light pulsed. What about my reward? Your reward? Was I not promised great rewards? I'm pretty sure it was repeated, numerous times. You will wield my artifact, Dawnbreaker. She chose to ignore the latter part my comment. You mean the item that was the spoils of my battle after cleansing your temple? Something I would have gotten regardless? There was a bit of silence, I think she was contemplating what I said. But I was curious and reached out to poke the ball of light. Nothing happened, but I kept poking it. Was this a projection of sorts? I'm aware that these Daedric couldn't enter the world normally, they could only do something like this, but does this lead back to her realm? My academic mind was overwhelmed with curiosity, or that's how I rationalized it to myself. I followed the thread that linked to this little ball of light and touched on the kaleidoscope. I wouldn't really need any calculations, using the thread as a sort of bridge. I opened a portal. I looked forward, and a woman on a throne staring back at me, completely dumbfounded. She radiated power, enough to make me freeze in place, but I was also overwhelmed by what I saw. Beautiful. She had bright blonde hair that flowed down past her shoulders, and glossy skin that was free from any blemishes. Blue robes that hugged every curve of her body, and long legs that my eyes refused to look away from. The robes were cut just high enough to see her legs in all their glory. Oh my. Did your heart just skip a beat? No comment. Sorry, wrong address. I quickly closed the portal, realizing what I had just done. That was stupid. Yup. This is going to blow up in your face. Oh, spectacularly. You. How did you opened a portal to my realm of oblivion, how? Her voice carried her confusion, annoyance, and surprise. Portal, what portal? Anyways, I was promised rewards, I think great was mentioned as well. So. I masterfully changed the subject. Fine. But I will have answers to my questions. What rewards do you wish? I will grant anything in my power. Gold, knowledge. Really, anything in your power? I questioned. Don't do it. I'm sorry, Draig. No. Don't you dare. I said I would, and so I shall. She said with a bit more power in her voice. Be my woman. I answered without a shred of hesitation whatsoever. God damn it. What? Her confused voice echoed out. Why? This can only end badly. Poor impulse control combined with the fact that I'm a teenage devil. Excuses. You're right, those legs were just too much for me to resist. Well, it was a short partnership, but it was fun. Nice knowing you. I would gladly die between those thighs of hers. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe I did this. You have a plan here. Yeah, don't die. Good plan. Are there any other steps? Yeah, part 2 is where I bury my head, bet we. Okay, so no follow-up then. Admittedly, part 2 is a work in progress. You know, this is where either a rejection or an acceptance comes. Usually a rejection in my experience. I mumbled. Okay, to be fair, it only happened once. I wasn't exactly the most social person when I was younger, and I asked a girl out. Got rejected, blah blah teenage angst, then I wallowed in self-pity for like 2 weeks before getting over it. I blinked and a moment later I was back on the ground, standing in front of Meridia's statue. Gone was the glowing orb of light, replaced with the familiar outline of a woman I had previously seen. Huh, I didn't think you could project such a thorough copy of yourself across dimensions. I admired her power. Yeah, let's go with that. But in seriousness, the aspect of her that was present wasn't any more powerful than that glowing orb, it just seemed like more of her was there. Rarely do I find a situation that requires my undivided attention so that I show myself in such a way. She answered, boring into me with quite a bit of pressure. Oh boy, I may have fucked up. You think? So, how we looking on Juggernaut Drive there, Drag? Sure, if you want to go out with a bang. Think she'll ask me how I want to die. Hint hint, it has to do with those amazing, milky white legs. I wouldn't even be mad if that happened. You know what? I got this. I adjusted my tie, brushed off any dust on my clothing and fixed my hat. It's a pleasure to meet you, face to face. I believe this is the second time we are meeting, after you had torn a hole into my realm. She said dryly. Doesn't ring a bell. I just shrugged. Anyways, does a rejection need a meeting like this? My feelings won't be hurt, maybe my pride a little bit, but that's life. Do you think my words are a jest? She raised an eyebrow and the temperature got a little bit warmer around me. To be fair, I didn't really think this through. I guess she's someone who doesn't or can't go back on her oaths. Her word being beyond reproach and all that. Frankly, I'm surprised you didn't have some kind of contingency for a situation like this, or even offered such an open reward. I usually don't. She practically hissed. But I was understandably distracted, having just witnessed a mortal tear a hole into my realm. Is it weird that even her angry face looks cute, getting distracted? Perhaps I should have checked to make sure you weren't in a relationship first. Gods, I hope she wasn't. That would just make this a million times worse. I don't spend my time chasing after mortal whimsies. She crossed her arms, frowning. Do you dislike me then? Okay, not a bad start, communication is good. There are no physical traits of yours that I find particularly distasteful. And eyed me again, seemingly relaxing just a bit. Your lifespan, mortals only exist for a blink of an eye, we are eternal, we will watch this world burn and turn to ash as every soul eventually returns to the void. She was surprisingly gentle in her tone. My base lifespan is at least 10,000 years. And it isn't very hard to prolong it past that. I replied. I was already ancient when this world was still young. You haven't even seen 2 decades yet. She said bluntly. I like older women. I countered with a smile. And isn't that something to suddenly discover about myself? It seems I do have a preference. This isn't even my true form, I have no set gender. I could look however I wanted. But it's the form you chose to identify yourself with, it's who you think yourself as and who I find physically attractive. She wouldn't have looked like that in the comfort of her own home if she didn't want to look like that. I have enemies, other lords who wouldn't hesitate to strike out at you for even speaking to me. Those who would take your soul and torture it for eternity. I'm pretty strong, and I'll get even stronger. I could end your life with a snap of my fingers. She hissed. There was no killing intent in her voice, no true desire to harm me. I have confidence to take you with me. I summoned my boosted gear and let Drag's power flow out. She looked at me and then at the gauntlet. Akatosh's child? No. I don't think she really cared too much about it for the moment, she looked lost in her own thoughts. Why? She finally asked me as if all the momentum she built up had suddenly deflated. You're going to need to be more specific. Why are you intent on making me your woman, as you so aptly put it? Is it some sort of twisted fantasy of yours to have me under you? Or maybe you are under some delusions that this will give you some control over my spheres of influence. If you're looking for some underlying scheme or rational reason, I don't have one. I just stared into her eyes for a moment. I simply like you. You like me. She repeated, almost in disbelief. Are you not going to profess your undying devotion and love for me? She waved her hand flippantly. Don't be ridiculous, I don't love you. Oh shit, I hope you're going somewhere with this. I saw her frown, possibly even get close to getting annoyed. Love isn't something so hollow, nor do I believe in that nonsense about love at first sight. It's something built through a bond shared between two people, from trust and communication combined with a mutual affection. I don't love you, I like you. I have romantic feelings towards you that have started budding from the moment we met. I have the desire to spend time with you and get to know you better. If and only if our relationship ever progressed to that point, then I will say those words to you and mean them from the bottom of my heart. Huh, I guess I never put my own feelings into words before. Do you think all it takes is some honeyed words to win my affection? Her voice was quiet and for some reason she didn't look at me in the eyes. No. I think you deserve to be properly courted. I took a step forward, she glanced at me but didn't show any discomfort as I got closer. I can't always leave my realm like this. There may even be days, weeks that we wouldn't be able to meet. I also have responsibilities that would take me far and force me away. I slowly reached out and took one of her hands, she was hesitant but allowed me. But I'm willing to put in the work. She looked down at our hands, and I may have been seeing things, but it looked like the faintest color of pink dusting her cheeks. She lightly pulled hers away, taking a step back. I must return, keep my sword with you at all times, so that I may keep an eye on you and contact you if needed. She quietly said, looking rather distracted. Does that mean you accept? She looked back at me one last time, I didn't see any anger, discomfort, or even annoyance on her face. I think she was at most, conflicted and unsure of what to do. I do not go back on my word. And she suddenly left. I felt a thump in my heart, watching her depart. How the hell did that work out? Refuge in audacity. No, seriously, that was some bullshit, you are lucky as hell. Yes, yes I am. I was humming to myself, and I had a small pep in my step as I walked towards solitude. I had been prepared to go find the old man at the tavern, but I saw him sitting down in his cart, looking a mite pissed off. You don't look too good. I said. Oh lad, you're back. He stood up. I lost me a good bit of coin betting on dice. You look like you're in a good mood, deal with that stuff at the temple. Yup, just a necromancer causing trouble. That can't be all, I've seen that look before, lad. A lady was involved, eh? Geez, what a horn dog. Fine, I may have gotten myself a woman. He laughed and pat me on the shoulder. Gotta give an old man more than that, what was she like, how big was her? Alright. I quickly cut him off, something told me he would have gotten a bit smitten if he continued. I'll say this, she had legs for days. Legs for days? He raised an eyebrow. They were magnificent. I heard the old man just burst out laughing. But I didn't care, I was more focused on my new sword burning just a little bit brighter all of the sudden. Alright lad, where you heading next? How about we go back to Winterhold, I need to check back in at the college. Well, if you got the coin, I got the cart. To Winterhold then, but we're talking the long way round, I don't trust the mountain paths this time of year and them trolls be coming out of their caves, hungry something fierce. No problem, I have all the time in the world. I walked towards the very familiar towers of the college. The bounded field around the whole building was a much welcomed reprieve from the harsh weather outside. The trip had been long and rather dull. Too long to do a single straight shot, we had to rest a few times, so all in all, it was about 3 days before I got back here. I carried my new sword, Dawnbreaker, in my hand. I had wrapped it up with some cloth, I didn't want an obviously magical blade shining everywhere I went. I also felt a bit awkward about putting it into my storage ring for now, I didn't know how that would react with Meridia's sight, or whatever she was doing to watch over me. I would need to get a scabbard made at some point. Ah, just the person I wanted to see. I heard a familiar voice and turned around. Inther. I greeted. Did you make any progress on what I had asked? It should have been, what, almost a week ago that we last met. Indeed, I was lucky and someone answered back on my inquiries. It seems that I found someone in possession of an entire sword made out of the glass material you are looking for. A whole sword, that's more than I expected, but welcomed nonetheless. I thought for a moment, dimensions, size, and estimated how much I actually needed. How much? I hadn't received a price yet, the seller is of certain status, I didn't yet wish to approach without a firm understanding of your needs. I see. Buy the sword if you can, as I said, money isn't much of an issue. I swiped my ring and took out a bag of jewelry and the ebony axe from the undead I killed. Think you can sell this all for me? Oh my, is that ebony? He quickly took the axe to begin examining it. What wonderful craftsmanship, if I had to guess this is a very old piece yet it is still marvelously well kept. Fought an undead swinging it around. I shrugged. Oh, a Draugr with an ebony axe, he must have been a powerful one with status before he died. The elf nodded in understanding as he peeked inside the bag. It was just some trinkets that were scattered around the loot I had taken as well. Nothing too interesting, what's this? He picked out a ring in particular and inspected it. This is enchanted. Is it? I didn't even notice, not that I had paid it much attention to begin with. Whoops, I guess I left that in there. He just hummed, handing the ring to me and looking at the bag again. The jewelry will probably run about 1,000 septims, after I take my commission, of course. Of course. I accepted that he would be making coin off me, it was the nature of the business. The axe though, well, ebony isn't readily available on the market, even the Nord warriors all over will want this piece. I can estimate, probably around 5 to 6,000 septims at the lower end. That's better than I thought. I'm in no rush yet, but get a hold of that glass sword as soon as possible. The sooner I have it the sooner I can truly start planning out my mystic code. I'll reach out to my contacts right away. He gave a nod and wrapped everything up, taking it to who knows where. I didn't think he would cheat me, he was too open about his practices for that. If it got around that he was cheating his customers, the people in the college would stop trusting him. No doubt the Archmage also keeps an eye on his dealings, if anything crossed certain lines, I don't think he would stay on the sidelines. Regardless, it seems like everything is coming together. I can't wait to finally get started, though I don't think I'll be doing the actual forging. Guess I'll need to check back in on the companions for that, hopefully they aren't too pissed. I really need to keep my temper in check. It shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did. I flopped onto my bed, and that was something nice to think about. My bed, the first time I had actually been into my room in the college since coming here. It was just a small little room with a few shelves, a tables, and my bed inside. Nothing extravagant, but it got the job done and it's not like I would need to spend lots of time in here. Well, it beats sleeping outside in the snow. Barely. Another voice replied. I tilted my head up to see the familiar from of Meridia, sitting on the edge of my bed. Hello. I'm glad I shut my door, would have been a bit awkward otherwise. I'm happy to see you again. Even if I didn't expect our next meeting to be so soon. She crossed her arms and snorted. Is this the hole that you live in? For now, I guess. I don't really need much else while studying here at the college. I suppose this college is impressive enough, by mortal standards. She gazed up at the ceiling. I can only recall a handful of places in this world that have better protections than here. I'm glad it gets your seal of approval. I lightly chuckled. Of course I want you to. She cut herself off. I expect certain standards from you. Well, I do have a question while you're here. Would it be okay to store your sword inside my ring? I wiggled my finger. Let me see. She gestured, I walked around my bed and sat next to her. I felt her hand stroke the metal band, inspecting it. It would not be a problem. Her hand started to pull away but I lightly grabbed it, there was only a slight surprise on her end, but she allowed it all the same. Can I ask why you're here? Do you not welcome me? She said quietly. I'll always be happy to have you here, I'm just wondering if something is wrong or... I merely had a few moments free. She replied bluntly. I see, it must be time-consuming, having to overlook all your followers in addition to your duties that involves your domain. She was a god in all but name, I can somewhat guess that she had a lot of things she did on a daily basis. I do not have much influence in Skyrim, but in other parts of Tamriel, I have entire congregations waiting on my word and acting as extensions of my will. She sighed, and I saw her relax more than I had before. Unfortunately, that also means I end up with some particularly stupid mortals. Well, that's inevitable, people are stupid in general. I rolled my eyes as the thought of believers, not because I was looking down on her, but those groups tend to attract the idiots by nature of their inception. But you seem upset over something particular, what happened? She looked conflicted. I don't think she was used to talking to people or rather opening up in any capacity. I mean, from what I heard about her peers, they weren't the most friendly sort. One of my priests had the idea that I would be pleased if he raised a group of undead, then sacrificed them to me at one of my temples. Her words were venomous as she spat them out. Of course, overturn the natural order to gain favor with one whose domain is life. What a genius plan. I deadpanned. Want me to go beat him up for you? I gave her a smirk. I heard a small laugh from her for the first time, and it was adorable. His own actions had already seen to that. While still disgusting abominations, he only managed to raise a few dozen skeletons and improperly at that. They proceeded to attack him before his followers could intervene. She calmed herself, her stoic expression returned after a few moments of silence. She spoke again. I am unsure of how I am supposed to proceed with this foolishness. Ah, she's still unsure of how to act or what to do. The fact that she hasn't taken her hand away is a good sign though. To be honest, I don't know either, I'm kind of making it up as I go along. Why don't you tell me more about yourself? What do you wish to know? Tell me something silly, like your favorite color, flower, food, animal, anything. I want to know more about you than what I've read in a book. She looked a bit surprised. You don't wish to ask me about the time before Nirn or of my origins? Did you think I was trying to pry some secret information from you? The thought crossed my mind. She replied honestly. I see. I couldn't help but sigh. I guess there is still too much distance between us for something like dragon's tongue. She cut me off. My favorite flower is dragon's tongue. Yellow is the color I enjoy the most. And I find ducks pleasant to watch. I just stared for a moment, a small smile creeping up on my face. What about food? I have no preferences for mortal sustenance. Well, we'll have to fix that in the future. I'm happy that she's willing to meet me halfway here. Thank you for telling me. I gave her hand a little squeeze. She looked down to where our fingers were intertwined, staring for a moment. I am confused. Is that why you came back so soon? Even if she had a few moments, it seemed like she came here with a purpose. She didn't answer, but instead stood up. I wish to test something. I was going to respond, but I quickly felt something I was unfamiliar with, her lips pressed against mine ever so slightly and only for a brief moment. After that brief moment, saw her trace her finger across her lips, like she was unsure of what happened. She turned to look at me, maybe even somewhat sadly. I need to return. I see. I said, standing up as well. I'll be waiting until next time. My time spent with you so far has been agreeable. She said quietly. Before I can step away from my duties again, I expect you to remain whole and in good health. I took a step forward, my hands reached for hers. She looked a bit hesitant, and dare I say, bashful, as I felt her soft hands in mine for another moment before she disappeared. I took a deep breath to calm my beating heart. What a woman. I grabbed my sword and put it into my ring, and as I took a step out of my room, I was suddenly teleported away. I blinked, looking around. I was in a room I didn't recognize, circular in nature, so I assumed in one of the college's towers. There were books everywhere and various magical doodads. At the center of the room was a small garden with all sorts of herbs growing with an artificial light right above. Wilhelm, glad you could come. Archmage Aaron popped up next to me. Well, I didn't really have a choice. I said dryly. Oh. Indeed, I suppose you are correct. It was my fault, but I'm sure you can understand, because you see, I was quite frantic when I found out a Daedric lord had appeared in my school. He didn't yell, but his words carried a lot of weight, I could tell he was upset. Whoops. Yes, whoops. He frowned. What did you do, Wilhelm? Did you make a deal with one of them? Please tell me you didn't sell your soul. I didn't, I'm perfectly fine. I denied. Then what did you do to get the attention of one of their ilk? He paced around the room. Your job, you went to the statue of Meridia, that's who appeared, I see. Did you become her champion then? I heard about her champions in the past, wielding her holy sword. I have the sword, I brought it out from my ring. But I didn't become her champion. Oh, Wilhelm, divines, you didn't steal it from her temple, did you? He sighed. It's okay, this is fixable, at least you aren't bound to her. She'll want to be appeased, she hates undead fiercely. Perhaps we should find some rogue necromancers around Skyrim and offer them up. He stroked his beard, looking around the room and pulled several books to him. No. No. A few crypts are around here, no doubt they have Draugr walking the halls, perhaps she'll take that as a peace offering. I didn't steal it either, she willingly gave it to me. I scratched my cheek, gods this was embarrassing. It's like trying to tell my mom that I finally got a girlfriend. I believe I am missing something then. He slammed a book shut. Yeah, how do I put this? I thought about how to phrase this properly. I cleared out her temple from a necromancer, and she offered me a reward something like, I'll give you anything in my power. Oh, brilliant, so you asked for the sword then. He clapped his hands. Well done, Dawnbreaker is marvelous sword, especially when diving into the ancient tombs that litter Skyrim. Not quite. He stopped, staring at me as his eyes narrowed. Wilhelm, what did you do? So I may have, asked Hertobimi woman. Pardon? I believe I misheard you. He lost pretty much all light in his eyes as he just looked at me, utterly dumbfounded. I asked her to be my woman. Ah, I thought that's what I heard you say. He clapped his hands, casting a spell and summoning a bottle of ale into his hand, before downing it quite quickly. So, you are in a romantic relationship with the Daedric Lord, Meridia. Yup. Okay. Okay. I questioned. He nodded his hands, summoning a staff into his hand. He walked up to me, gave me a reassuring smile, and bopped me on the head. Ow. I rubbed my head. I'm not apologizing. Of course not, you're still a young man, I doubt the head on your shoulders has even taken back your thought process yet. I raised a finger up, about to respond but closed my mouth. That's actually fair. Indeed. He sighed. I suppose, this is substantially better than the worst case I was preparing for. So, would it be okay if she appeared here more? Are you asking me for permission for your Daedric Lord girlfriend to tear her way into this realm from oblivion and pop into the college, for a social visit? Okay, when you spell it out like that, it sounds kind of weird. You know, this isn't the strangest conversation I've ever had. I have met Sheogorath before. He rubbed his temples. Even with the power of the college backing me, I don't think I have the ability to stop her, if I wanted to that is. Mind you, I don't wish to do battle against an entity like her. My only request is that no harm come to my college and its people. I will make sure nothing happens. I gave my word. Okay. He nodded. Now it's time for your punishment. What? Did you think you could summon a Daedric Lord into my college without any consequences? He pulled out a map and handed it to me. Talfdir was heading an expedition marked on the map. He finally uncovered the entrance to some ancient ruins and it's crawling with undead. I think it appropriate that you help deal with that considering you're new. Lady friend. He looked at the sword still in my hand. Fine. I agreed. And, I'm sorry I didn't really think things through. He sighed and pat my shoulder. Believe it or not, I understand. While I never fell for someone quite so, I did have my own love when I was younger. Sometimes we can't control who makes us feel that way. Now. He clapped his hands. Off you go. I suddenly felt myself be pulled away again, falling down into a pile of snow in the courtyard. Okay, I'll admit I deserved that. So, Talfdir, can you give me an idea of what I can expect? We were quietly riding along in the small caravan that departed from the college. Only the necessities had been completed over at the excavation site. Basically, setting up some stairways, reinforcing the immediate paths to stop cave-ins. They had to stop when they somehow triggered a bunch of the mummified remains in the place to start rising. There were actually a few people from Winterhold coming along. A couple guards and a few of the Jarl's people. This whole thing was conducted with the support of the Jarl, surprisingly, considering the strained relationship. But I guess gold can mend all kinds of bridges. Yeah, they agreed to a 60-40 split with the Jarl, as in the college getting the 40% for all gold and items of immediate monetary value. The terms were more specific than that, but I didn't really bother to listen to all of that. Basically, we would get the historical artifacts, a decent sum, and the blessing from the Jarl since this thing was still on his land. I recognized the guards coming along, not really knowing their names, but hey, we shared a drink and that was something important in this place. They were happy enough that I was coming along to clear the place of undead. They were more so just to make sure everything goes smoothly and whatnot. There were probably another dozen people of various backgrounds. Scholars, mages, or people who were just academically interested in the ancient ruins. So, yeah, several carts carrying supplies and everything braving these blizzards-like winds. Thankfully the ruins were only about an hour out of the city. Draugr, he said idly, producing a flame in his hand for warmth. They seem to be the basic variety, but there are quite a few of them. I ran into some of them on my job. Actually, I'd been meaning to ask a question about that. One of the undead that the necromancer used was a bit stronger than the rest. He even did this magic, where he shouted and blew me away. You faced a Draugr that could use the Thursday Talfder looked at me in surprise. No idea what that is. Oh yes, I forgot you are new to Skyrim. I suppose this knowledge isn't as widespread outside. The Thursday at its basic, is the language of dragons. He said, molding his hands around his small flame, keeping it contained in radiating heat. The Thursday isn't like magic as you would probably know it. When a dragon speaks, the world listens. Oh, that makes sense. They aren't casting spells, they are forcing their will onto reality. I mused. It sounded more like divine words from back home. Actually, that's also quite similar to how primordial runes work as well. That is exactly correctly. He blinked, giving a smile. Even the fires that spout from their mouths, it is merely a few words for a dragon, yet not much a mortal can do to match it. I have heard legends that when two dragons do battle, it is actually them having an argument. Oh, that sounds interesting. I wonder. I think me and Drake shared a similar thought there. Is there a way to learn the Thursday There is, though it takes decades of intense study to even master a single word. There is actually an order of monks on the throat of the world that devote themselves entirely to do so. Interesting, very, very interesting. Well, I don't believe you should have to worry about such things here. In my research, I haven't been able to pinpoint this place as anywhere of great importance. Talfder reassured. Not to say that the ruins hold no academic purpose. We can only guess at what history is underground here. RORR, a voice boomed out over the snow. Is that a troll? I questioned, seeing the outline of an ape-like creature smashing its hands into the ground. So, it appears. Talfder nodded. Huh, I haven't actually seen one before. Ugly things, aren't they? He hummed in agreement. And they serve no true purpose. If it were a bear or some sort of animal, I may have just deemed it appropriate to scare them away. But a troll just burdens whatever region it decides to settle down in. You want this one? I eyed him. I wouldn't mind taking care of it, but... He gave a small chuckle. I wouldn't mind stretching these old bones for a moment. The flame in his hand danced around his fingers, and with a flick of his wrist it shot towards the troll who was still trying to intimidate the caravan. I was expecting a fireball of some sorts, maybe even something that would disintegrate the creature, but no, the ball erupted into a pillar that shot a good 20 feet into the air and consumed everything in that small area. I guess the title of Master isn't just for show, even if it is for a different school of magic. That should do it. He smiled lightly. Not even a mild roadblock, but then again, the college really does have some monsters in it. Here we are. Talfder exclaimed, as the excavation site came into view. It wasn't particularly large, about what you would imagine. The people all around me started to unload their carts, several began setting up tents and making a camp that was livable. The weather hadn't let up, even now, the snowstorm made it hard to see more than 50 yards in front of yourself. Is there even a name to go along with this place? I looked down into the dugout pit that revealed just a single door and some stone structures protruding out of the ground. Clearly it had been swallowed by the ravages of time. We didn't have time to research anything inside yet. The Draugr came onto us rather quickly and I was more concerned about evacuating my students and the non-mages that had accompanied us on the project. Talfder stated. Ah, that's why he didn't just deal with them all by himself. I'm probably not even needed here, but this is my punishment. I guess I'll do the grunt work. And I don't mind helping out Talfder, he probably needs to oversee the camp as well. I guess I'll get started then. Make sure you're probably prepared. Even if you have full confidence, you should always have the basics with you. Talfder lightly chastised me, almost in a grandfatherly way. I have potions, food and a lot of other supplies for emergencies. He just nodded, smiling. It's just an old man's worries. If you don't feel like you can handle it, just come back out. He gave me a small pat on the back. I can handle this. I waved him off. Alright, off you go then. He gestured me away, letting out a small laugh. What a nice guy. Definitely my favorite teacher at the college so far. Well, here we go. I walked down and opened the doors, leading to a half-caved entranceway. It looked like it had been reinforced already, allowing for people to come and go. There were a few light sources everywhere, some magical-looking candles, a few lanterns here or there with what looked like fireflies inside. I think there was some light coming from the ceiling as well. I couldn't quite see how it was working, but I think it was magical. Well, when in doubt, assume it's magic. The first true room was a bit odd, like a huge stone pillar with a winding staircase and a bunch of doors everywhere. The staircase looked very weathered, practically falling apart at the seams. I think this room was about as far as the previous expedition got before being chased away. There were a couple scaffoldings around, keeping the walls nice and sturdy. I did admire their precautions. It wasn't like this in the olden days of my old home. They were more concerned about finding treasure than securing something for historical significance. Well, it would suck, for people without wings. The refreshing feeling of my wings being exposed to air was always nice after not using them for some time. I did make a mental note to give them some more exercise every now and then. They were technically a body part even if they were magical in nature. A simple glide down to the bottom and I was met with the immediate attention of a dozen or so entities. They were already up and about, skulking out from the corners of the room. Their armor clanking with each step, metal weapons being drawn from weathered sheaths. I did make sure to put my wings away, don't want a luck hit to nip them. It seems like something that would be excruciatingly painful. Well, show time. My body circuits flared, reinforcement covered my body and I drew Dawnbreaker from my ring. Its warm flame was very reassuring, even if I wasn't at all intimidated by the situation, it was soothing to hold in my hand. Hey, Meridia, are you watching? I whispered lightly. The light at the center of my sword pulsed with a faintly ethereal glow. Well I offer these to you. Does this count as being romantic if she hated undead with a burning passion? The first Draugr ran up to me, hand fully extended back in a swinging motion. I barely paid it any mind as my sword swung out before it could finish. Its body was cleaved in two, and practically disintegrated into ash on contact. I had barely felt any resistance, even with its metal armor in the way. I realized just now how powerful this sword truly was in the correct circumstances. The nature to be anti-undead, to be conceptually stronger when facing opponents that meet those criteria. Even if the steel armor wasn't anyway necrotic, it was still but paper in front of my weapon. Meridia loathed undead with a passion, I could practically feel her jubilation transfer from the sword. If this really makes you so happy, we should make a date of it. I laughed as they clamored towards me. My sword pierced through another undead, bursting it into flames. This was the bare minimum of what the weapon could do, yet it was such an overwhelming weapon for its fated enemy. There were further enchantments on it though, ones I couldn't even begin to unravel without years of research. It was a weapon created by a goddess, intended to be wielded by mortal hands. Perhaps not a divine construct, but it was something that could trade blows with a noble phantasm and not lose. I moved through the mob of undead creatures, their swinging not much more than childish flailing. Every swing of my sword, and another walking corpse was released from the prison of unlife and whatever powers bound were free. It was exhilarating, wielding such a powerful weapon, and it was all mine. With a few short moves, the group of zombies had disappeared from the world, and my sword sung with happiness, light filling the room and removing any stain of corruption. Dungeon diving was apparently a pastime in Skyrim. The traps, undead, winding tombs and mazes that stood between an adventurer and the loot at the end. What no one wanted to talk about, was how fucking annoying it was going through everything. I was probably pissed off by the third room. After killing all the Draugr, and finding the secret passage through that little area, it led me into more of a crypt. There were coffins lining the walls with a weird pedestal at the end of a narrow chamber with a magical-looking necklace on it and some metal bars stopping me from going forward. I had tried to do the obvious thing, pull the metal bars up like I had done previously, but it looked like they weren't budging. I mean, I could probably blast me way out of here, but this whole place could come down on me. What a situation I found myself. The only thing of significance in this little area was an obviously magical necklace on the pedestal right near the metal bars. Can you say a trap? I picked it up, waiting for something to happen, and nothing. So, am I missing something here or? An ethereal figure appeared in front of me, almost like someone was projecting their consciousness across a far distance. Hold, Mage, and listen well. He paused, taking another look at me, seemingly surprised by what he saw. No, who are you? How, you aren't the one who was supposed to come? Pardon? I questioned the odd person. This is all wrong, you shouldn't be here, the predictions foretold the Dragonborn, he muttered. Why have you come here? I was asked to clear this place of the undead for the college expedition. I tilted my head. And who are you to question my coming here? Who exactly are you? I narrowed my eyes. I am of the Sigic order. He said, once again staring at me. You shouldn't be here, leave, mage, there are powers at work that you tamper with. Things that no mortal should put their hands on. Never heard of the Sigic order, but the way he said it, he made it sound like just giving that name would answer all my questions. I suppose they might be famous or something around here. Regardless. I don't answer to you. You've been warned. He said ominously before dispersing. Well, fuck you too. So, this place isn't as mundane as Talfdir thought. Well, mundane I guess is relative with magical zombies walking around. I just looked around this little room I was still in, metal bars barred my way but there had to be some way through. I put my hand on the wall and pulsed some mana, looking for maybe a trick somewhere, until my eyes landing on a coffin sitting upright against the wall. It looked a little too straight to be just haphazardly left there. I inspected it, placing my hand on the metal covering. It was empty and the wall behind it was missing. Aha! I kept my reinforcement up and pulled the lid off. It fought me the entire way. I was apparently going about this incorrectly, but whatever. I didn't care about the traps in this place and just ripped the thing off. Neat. The rest of the dungeon had been a bit more of the same. A level that had arrow traps if you put in a wrong combination with these weird, spinning obelisks with certain figures on them. I just froze the little holes where the arrows came out with a spell and got through it with trial and error. Swinging blades that swung out from the edges of rooms, magical traps that exploded if you stepped on them, and even spikes that shot up from the ground. Someone really didn't want this place to be discovered. But the further I went, the more a strange feeling crept up in my heart, a foreboding sensation that something was awaiting me. Something that tickled my danger sense. There was one more room ahead, the magical energy I felt was palpable, getting through the traps barely even inconvenienced me. I don't think they account for magic when creating them, or maybe whatever was waiting for me was much more dangerous and these were supposed to just keep out the idiots. As I walked through, I saw it, massive blue orb, slowing spinning in place. I could feel it, the pure, unadulterated power it emitted. That thing is dangerous. Drake spoke up immediately. I would be cautious of that thing even if I was here in my prime. That's not good. So much magical energy in the air here, it was practically stifling. I was a bit cautious to even cast a spell, I had no idea what reaction would occur. I took a step down the stairs, and as soon as my foot touched the wood I heard a cracking sound, as something ancient had just moved for the first time in many years. It stood up from a chair, the familiar figure of a Draugr, but immediately I could tell this one was different, like the one I fought at Meridia's temple. I hurriedly threw up a ward as flames spouted from its hands. It can cast magic, okay. With another thought, oak flesh covered my body and I made sure to double-check my reinforcement. My ward met its torrent of flames as I closed the distance, Dawnbreaker in my other hand. As we got close enough it tried to swing its own axe at me, but I ducked, overloading the ward and dispersing his flames spell. It's over, I swung my magical sword underneath him. Only to be intercepted by a magical barrier. A magical barrier strong enough to fight against the weapon a literal goddess gave to me. It pushed back the cleansing flames of my sword and a small explosion erupted at the focal point, blowing the sword out of my hand and causing me to stutter back. I saw it clearly, the torrent of power that was being streamed into this undead from the floating orb nearby. It was siphoning power from the thing, pure magical energy enveloping its body making it practically invulnerable to damage. I tried my trick from before, pushing a turn undead and a telekinesis together but they fizzled out when the barrier touched them. The steel axe in its hand swung with a fury as I stepped back, its free hand summoned ice that rained from the sky. Runic letters spun around my arm as I pushed them into the ground, bindings of Gaia. But it wasn't working, even with the roots springing forth, they withered and drained of any magical energy inside of them as they tried to grab a hold of the undead. Even physical damage was negated by the shield of magical energy, my attempt to restrain the undead had been repulsed. Maybe an explosion that doesn't directly target him. I swiped my ring, pulling out a couple jewels of varying quality. I overloaded them with magical energy and actualized my intent, throwing them towards the undead walking to me. Jumping back enough to not get caught, or so I thought. The explosion was larger than I had anticipated, feeling the shockwave and almost getting blown back. But once again the undead shrugged it off like it was nothing. I had hundreds of spells I could call upon, yet my mind raced trying to think of a solution. It seemed like I only had one option left. I withdrew my cane sword from my ring. It was soaked in my blood, so it was perhaps the best thing I could use as a catalyst for my true magic without using my body, which would be the height of foolishness. I pulled on the kaleidoscope, filling my sword with the dimensional magics. It shuddered under the strain, but I kept pulling from a multitude of parallel worlds, all filling inside. Condensing, collecting, and synthesizing the correct spell sequence. Pointing the tip of my blade at the undead, several spell circles spun around the metal, amplifying the sequence. Ether cannon. I let it all go. The blade shattered in my hand as the beam of light fired off, exploding into tiny pieces as even the handle burst open in my palm. It struck the barrier of magic, fighting against it, but it looked as if my hypothesis turned out correct. The barrier was pieced through and the undead's chest was blown open. I caught myself from falling forward. My body arched before stabilizing myself. I had to do something stupid there at the last moment and partial shoulder some of the burden from the actualization of the spell, otherwise my sword would have blown up prematurely. I don't know what happened, but the energy of this orb started going crazy. The magical energy in the room fluctuated, bursting in every which way. Was it because of my use of the kaleidoscope? Did it have some adverse reaction on this strange orb? What have you done? I turned around and saw that person appear again. He looked more whole than before. Just as he said it, a beam of light shot up from the orb and pierced the ceiling. The whole underground ruins shook, rocks and debris began falling everywhere. You have potentially doomed the world. Have you any idea what your meddling had caused? He shouted in anger. Several more figures appeared around the orb, gesturing to it as if they were about to cast something. We will take this away and deal with the aftermath of your incompetence. What? I took a step forward but was hit by a combined spell from several of the figures. I found myself unable to move and I just watched as they gathered in a circle around the orb and were about to transport it away. You want to steal from me? This is mine, I won it by combat. No. I said firmly, summoning my boosted gear. Boost, me and Daedric roared at the same time, drawing their attention. This doesn't concern you anymore, Mage. The leader, I suppose, the one who had spoken before, stood in my way. You were not destined to be here and you have ruined everything. You aren't even truly here, trying to play with spatial distortions in front of me? Come back in another 1,000 years. I looked him dead in the eye and snapped my fingers. The spell, the folding of space and time that allowed them to be here, while also not being here, shattered when I pulled over the correct world flow with the help of the kaleidoscope. Coward didn't even have the courage to show up in person. The ethereal figures had all disappeared in a blink of an eye, pulled back to where their real bodies were as time and space synced back up correctly. The only one left was the one who spoke to me. You want to steal my spoils after I had cleaned everything up? Maybe if he had spoken to me with some manner of respect, explained to me his circumstances, this might have ended differently. I looked at him, the way he projected himself was different, like how Meridia did. I looked at the tether that was acting as a bridge. Cute. Be gone. I did the equivalent of yanking him back towards the source, sending him hurling through space back to his point of origin. You got a plan? Daedric asked. I do have a plan. It isn't a very good plan, but it is a plan. What do you need? He was being oddly cooperative. I just need your help. You should know what my magic does, the dimensional refraction phenomenon. Being able to pull an infinite amount of magical power from an infinite number of worlds. Indeed, we're going to do the opposite here. This thing is also drawing in an unfathomable amount of magical energy, possibly even infinite in scope, but it's all from this singular world. It might drain this place dry if we let it, or it could blow up. I have no idea. You want to use the gauntlet? Sorry, it's all I got. Okay, let's do this. I'll help where I can from inside. I just nodded at the dragon, playing my gauntlet-clad hand on the magical orb and pulled open the kaleidoscope. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.